All right, so today we're diving into something I think a lot of people are curious about. Ketamine-assisted therapy.
KT.
Yeah, KT, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like everyone has probably heard of ketamine.
Yeah.
Maybe not always in the most positive light.
Right.
You know what we're talking about?
Definitely not what we're focusing on.
No, not at all. So
Yeah.
what we're really zeroing in on is how this is used in a therapeutic setting
Right.
as a way to help people who are struggling with mental health challenges.
Absolutely.
And to really get a grasp on this,
Yeah.
we've got this research paper we're looking at. And it's really fascinating stuff because it's all about people who went through KT,
Right.
specifically for treatment-resistant depression.
Right.
So this is folks who have tried maybe other things that haven't really worked for them.
Yeah, more traditional therapies, maybe medication, and they're not getting relief.
Exactly. And this is a qualitative study. So it's not just like, here's the data, here's the numbers.
Right. It's really in-depth.
It's about 12 people total.
Yeah.
Right.
Some folks dealing with depression, and then others who are healthy volunteers.
Oh, interesting.
From this first study.
Okay, so they have like a control group, basically.
Kind of, yeah, to get a baseline.
Got it.
To compare, yeah.
So what we're really trying to do today is understand what makes this different from regular therapy.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly, if someone was thinking about trying this, like what could they expect based on these real people who've actually gone through it?
Exactly, because, it can be kind of mysterious.
Yeah, totally.
And there's a lot of information and misinformation out there.
Yeah. So let's just get right into it.
Yeah.
What is the core, like, fundamental difference between KT and, say, like, going to a therapist every week and talk about your problems?
Yeah. Well, the really big difference is that with KT, there's this medication involved, right? Ketamine, it's integrated into the therapy.
So it's not just talking.
It's not just talking.
It's like a biological component as well.
It's this combination of the medication and the psychological work.
Okay, and it's not just like you go in, you take the ketamine, and then you leave.
No, not at all.
Right.
The research talks about this whole structured process.
Okay.
So typically you start with like a prep session. You meet with your therapist.
Okay.
You talk about what to expect, what your goals are.
To get your mind right.
Yeah, exactly. To kind of get ready for the experience.
Cool.
Then you have the actual ketamine session. Sometimes it's a series of those.
Right.
In this particular study, they did 1 to 3 sessions.
Okay.
But, it can vary depending on the individual and the treatment plan.
Right.
And during those sessions, there's a therapist there and maybe a nurse, too.
Okay.
To support you, to make sure you're safe.
Yeah, to keep an eye on things.
Exactly. And then, importantly, it doesn't just end there.
All right.
There's these integration sessions afterwards.
Okay. Where you kind of process what you went through, you talk about it with your therapist.
Interesting.
You try to make sense of the experience and connect it back to your life and your goals.
Okay, so it's really a much bigger thing than I think a lot of people probably realize.
Yeah, it's not just about the ketamine itself. It's this whole process.
Yeah. So just for comparison's sake,
right,
the paper also mentions some of the more traditional treatments.
Yeah.
Like CBT or behavioral activation.
Right, those are kind of like the go-tos for depression.
So those are purely talk therapy, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. They're focused on identifying and changing negative thought patterns and behaviors, or on getting people more engaged in things they enjoy.
Right.
That can help lift their mood.
And so it seems like one of the biggest differences here is that KAT is kind of inducing this altered state of consciousness. Right, because of the ketamine.
Exactly. It's not just about talking. It's about
shifting your perspective in a really fundamental way.
And they talk about this in the paper, too.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
The participants describe their experiences with ketamine in these really interesting ways. Like, you're having different perceptions, feelings, even visual experiences that you wouldn't have in regular talk therapy.
Okay. And so that's...
And what's really interesting is that it's not like they're trying to have these experiences.
Right.
The ketamine seems to create this space where their defenses kind of soften and they can explore their inner world in a more passive way, which is totally different from like CBT where you're actively trying to restructure your thoughts.
Yeah, you're working at it.
It's much more active.
Yeah.
This is much more like letting go and seeing what comes up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And another thing that they mentioned is that ketamine can sometimes work like really quickly.
Yeah.
Right, like faster than antidepressants.
Right. Sometimes you see these antidepressant effects much sooner.
And why would that be so important for someone with treatment-resistant depression?
Well, if you've been struggling with depression for a long time, and nothing's been working.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that something could provide relief quickly is huge.
Huge, right?
Yeah. It can be so debilitating to be stuck in that state.
So this is like a glimmer of hope.
Exactly. It's like there might be a way out.
Yeah.
So even though the paper didn't go super deep into like the brain science behind it, it's worth mentioning that ketamine seems to work differently than traditional antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
It affects these things called glutamate receptors in the brain.
Okay.
And that can lead to these changes in mood and thinking pretty rapidly.
Interesting. So it's like a whole different pathway.
Yeah, it's a whole different mechanism.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, this is where I think things get super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They keep talking about this idea of set and setting. And I think for most people who aren't like super familiar with this field, that probably sounds kind of
a little woo-woo.
Yeah, a little out there. So can you explain what that actually means?
Yeah. So set and setting is this really key concept. In therapies that involve altered states of consciousness.
Like KT?
Like KT, right?
Okay.
So set refers to your internal state. Like what's going on in your mind, your mindset, your expectations about the experience, your intentions for the therapy, and just your overall emotional state.
Got it.
Leading up to the session.
Okay.
And a setting is about the external environment.
Okay, so like...
so a physical space where the ketamine is administered, who's there with you, the therapist, the nurse, and just the general atmosphere. Is it calm? Is it peaceful? Is it sterile?
So it's not just about the drug?
No, it's not just about the drug. It's about creating the right container for the experience.
Like your mind and the space around you.
Exactly. And the paper really emphasizes this, that these factors can really shape the whole experience and ultimately the therapeutic benefits.
So you want to set yourself up for success.
Right. You want to optimize the conditions to make it as positive and productive as possible, and also to minimize any potential distress.
Because it sounds like it could be potentially intense.
It can be, yeah.
So let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, this is really interesting. I'm intrigued.
Right.
What are some things that they could expect based on what these people in the study went through?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, you're going to need to prepare.
Okay.
The thesis really highlights that preparation is key.
Right.
And participants describe doing a few different things to get ready, like practicing mindfulness.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, trying to understand how KT works.
Like the science of it?
Yeah, like even on a biological level, and also setting intentions for their sessions.
Oh, intentions. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, what are you hoping to get out of this experience?
Yeah. Are there specific things?
Yeah, some people had really specific therapeutic goals.
Okay.
Things they wanted to work through. Okay. Others were more like, I'm just going to be open to whatever comes up.
Right.
And the thesis has these quotes that really show how important that openness was and how they tried to manage their expectations.
Right.
Like one person said, I'm not going to have any specific expectations.
Okay.
I think it'll be more helpful for me and for the research if I just go in with an open mind.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like wanting to get better.
Yeah.
But also not being too attached how that's going to happen.
Exactly.
And the mindfulness part seems really important too.
Yeah, it came up a lot.
Okay.
Several participants mentioned that doing mindfulness exercises before their sessions helped them feel calmer, more present, more grounded.
That makes sense.
Like it was a way to center themselves and maybe lessen any anxiety they might have had about the unknown.
Totally. And it sounds like the therapists are also really involved.
Yeah, they're a big part of the preparation process.
Okay.
Talking through everything in detail so people know what to expect.
So it's really a collaboration.
It's a partnership between the individual and the therapist.
Okay, so let's say you've done all this prep work. You've got your intentions set. You're feeling good.
Right.
You're ready to go.
Yeah.
Like, what's the actual experience like?
Well, the study talks about this effort to create a setting that feels comfortable and not too clinical.
Right.
So often the sessions would be in these rooms with soft lighting, maybe some flowers or calming artwork to create a sense of peace and safety.
Nothing like a doctor's office.
Yeah. Very different from a typical medical environment.
More like a spa, almost.
Yeah, kind of. More like a space for introspection.
Right.
And the therapist is there with you throughout the session.
Yeah.
And participants really emphasized that the trust and safety they felt with their therapist was really crucial to being able to let go into the experience.
Because I imagine it could feel pretty vulnerable.
Right. It can be really intense.
Yeah.
So having that sense of trust and support is essential.
Totally. And some people even mentioned that it was helpful to hear about their therapist's own experiences.
Right. Sometimes therapists would share their own experiences where it felt appropriate.
Okay.
And that could really deepen the sense of trust. Like you're in this together.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's humanizing.
Totally. And the other thing that kept coming up in the research was the music.
Oh, the music. Yeah, that was huge. Yeah. Participants talked about how powerful the music was.
Right.
Like it could evoke these really strong emotions, guide the experience, almost like it was taking them on a journey.
Why?
Yeah, and some people even felt like it was leading them through memories or offering a sense of emotional release.
So it's not just like background music.
No, it becomes an active part of the therapy.
Yeah.
Like one person talked about how deeply moving church music was during their session.
Wow.
And it led to this really powerful visual and emotional experience that they described as feeling cleansed.
So the music is almost like another therapist.
Yeah, in a way, it can facilitate the process.
That's amazing. And then this whole idea of letting go, right?
Letting go of psychological burdens.
Yeah. Yeah, like trauma or stress. Or...
Right, all of that.
Yeah.
That was a big theme, too.
Seems like a lot of what this is about.
It's a major recurring theme.
Yeah.
And participants described how KT seemed to help them do that. Like some people found themselves revisiting past traumas.
Yeah.
But in a new way. That felt healing.
Like they were able to see it differently.
Yeah, one person shared this really powerful image.
Okay.
Instead of just reliving the memory, they were like, I started pirouetting and dancing within the memory.
Wow.
And the negative aspects just seemed to fall away.
That's so powerful.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Like a completely different way of processing trauma.
Right. It's not about like trying to fight it or...
No, it's not about actively trying to change it.
Yeah.
It's more about this spontaneous shift in perspective.
Wow.
And others found that they could let go of worries about the future, which allowed them to be more present in the moment.
Okay.
And then some participants also talked about visual experiences that often shifted throughout the session.
Okay.
Like starting with darker imagery associated with sadness or grief.
Right.
And then moving towards more hopeful and colorful scenes.
Oh, wow. So it's like a visual journey, too.
Yeah. And these visual shifts were often accompanied by corresponding shifts in their emotions.
Right. So it's like the visuals are reflecting what's happening inside.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like it's not always easy.
Right. It can be really intense.
Yeah.
And the paper talks about this potential for feeling vulnerable after the ketamine session. Yeah. Which is something I think anyone considering this really needs to understand.
Totally. And why is that?
Well, because the very act of letting go, while it can be incredibly therapeutic, can also leave you feeling exposed after the session. Like your defenses are down. Yeah. Participants talked about feeling raw and vulnerable, like they were emotionally sensitive.
Like you're just kind of out there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's why those integration sessions are so important. Because you need to process what you went through. Yeah. You need to connect it back to your daily life.
Right. Or your goals.
It's not just about the experience itself.
No, it's about integrating it. Yeah. Into your life.
Making it meaningful.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the paper also mentioned that some people found it challenging to return to normal life.
Right.
After having such a profound experience.
Right, because they're in this ketamine world where things feel different. Yeah. And then they have to come back to reality. Right. And that contrast can be pretty jarring.
Yeah, totally. And there's also that one case that they mentioned in the paper, which is really important to acknowledge.
Yes, definitely.
Where someone had an increase in suicidal thoughts.
Right. So one participant, after having what they described as a really deep spiritual experience during KT, had a temporary increase in suicidal ideation. Okay. And it's really important to emphasize that this was temporary. Right. And it was addressed and resolved with the support of their therapist. Okay, that's good.
But it does highlight that these experiences can be really intense.
Yeah.
And you can have these unexpected and complex emotional responses.
Yeah, so you really need to be
you need support
in the right hands.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you need to be carefully screened beforehand.
Right.
To make sure that this is an appropriate treatment for you.
Yeah, because it's not for everyone.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Exactly. And it really underscores the importance of the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
Right, and the integration sessions. It's not just about the ketamine itself.
No, it's about the whole package.
Yeah.
The preparation, the support, the integration, it's all connected.
So to sum all this up for us, what are the main differences between KAT and regular therapy?
Okay, so the big differences are
you've
got this combination of medication ketamine with psychotherapy.
Right.
You've got the altered state of consciousness that the ketamine induces. Yeah.
And then you've got this really big emphasis on set and setting.
Right.
To make sure that the experience is tailored to the individual.
Right, because everyone's different.
Everyone's different. Everyone's going to respond differently.
Yeah, and in terms of what someone might expect if they were considering this.
Yeah, I think you can expect a process that involves careful preparation with your therapist, a ketamine session that can be really intense and potentially transformative.
Right.
And then the need for ongoing support and integration afterwards to help make sense of everything.
And because of that vulnerability.
Exactly, because you might feel vulnerable after the session.
Yeah.
You need that extra support.
So I think it's clear that this is a really promising approach.
It is.
Especially for people who haven't found relief from traditional treatments.
Yeah, I think it offers a lot of hope for folks who are really struggling.
But it also comes with
But it's not a magic bullet.
It's not a quick fix.
And it's not for everyone.
Right. Yeah. And it's important to remember that everyone's experience can be different.
Totally. So we've learned a lot today.
We have.
It's a lot to digest.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
But I think as we leave this deep dive, there's this bigger question that I think is really worth considering. Which is, you know, given that these experiences can be so profound.
Right.
And the need for support.
Yeah.
Like, what does this tell us about how we think about mental health treatment more broadly?
That's a really good question.
Right.
Like, are there other ways that we could be incorporating altered states of consciousness into a therapeutic framework?
Right. And is that something we should be doing? Is it safe? Is it ethical?
Right. There are all these questions that come up.
And I think it really speaks to the multifaceted nature of healing.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not just about taking a pill.
It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Or talking to someone.
Right.
It's about this whole...
It's about the mind, the body, the spirit.
Yeah, this holistic approach.
The environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot to explore.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a really interesting conversation.
It has.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to dive into this.
Me too.